Hey, this is Braxton. Today I'm going to take you through Spaces, which is a track that came out on Colorize in 2021. I made it, I think I started writing this in like 2019, so it's quite old. There's definitely some plugins and like bits and bobs and things that I don't really use anymore, but I'll take you through and show you the stuff that I still do and still use now. I'll take you through kind of like how I kind of organize things and like how I process things. And then if anyone's got any questions or anything like that, so we'll whack them in the thing down below and I'll get back to you. I'm going to try and make this quick because those 45-minute long YouTube videos of people talking about how they EQ'd a kick drum is just chaos. I'm just going to go bang, 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 bang. Job done. Enjoy. This track started out in I think I started making it in 2019. The original idea was to make kind of like make a proggy tune, but just had like a big sort of like euphoric, late 90s euphoria breakdown sort of thing. And I was going for a track that after Space and Ibiza closed in 2016, I was like, my memories of that place is kind of like sort of Sash and Digweed era. And I wanted to kind of create a track that would work in both like the main club and the terrace sort of thing, based on that original version of Space, as opposed to what Space is now, which is not Space. And that was the track. And then I just didn't want to call it Space because I don't know, just whatever. Anyway, here's a track. Generally, the way I kind of like work, and it's still the way I work now, is I'll kind of lay stuff out exactly like this. I'll have like kicks and things like that at the top, sort of low end percussion stuff here. Mainly drums all here, so it'll be like shakers, claps, hats, all that sort of stuff, all kind of like separated individually. And then all that stuff there is kind of like pads and synths and kind of like quite big mid-sounding melodic information. This is all bass. This stuff here is kind of like, that's all sort of leads and like lead sounds and arps and things like that. Then we kind of have like sort of fluffy, frivolous synth sounds, tonal atmospheres and all that sort of stuff. And then just like white noise and crashes and all that sort of stuff at the bottom, and like textures, things like that as well. So let's just go through it sort of track by track, I guess. Kick up here. I don't know where the kick was from. Might be a sample from somewhere. Yeah, might have been a sample that I didn't get cleared from somewhere. So let's just kind of talk about what I did. I had like the LFO tool on it just to kind of like tame some of the initial transients because it was a bit too sharp. I use this on literally every single track just to kind of like squeeze as much out of the kick as possible and like lose as much out of the kick as possible, because otherwise you end up with your kick and your bass line sort of interfering with each other too much, sort of thing. So this is kind of like, I don't want to bypass it just in case it is quite obviously a sample that I've nicked from someone. So, but take my word for it, that all there is kind of like a big sort of wafty noise that you don't really want on your kick drum, or I didn't want on my kick drum for this track. Bit of EQ, another EQ. Oh, both just doing kind of identical things, because why not? And then Better Maker, which is just kind of like sort of enhancing the depth of it, basically. Do I do this on this track? Yeah, so all my kicks and low-end percussive sort of stuff generally goes into like a group, and that's where I apply my automation. So I'll have like the kick drum will be assigned to a filter on my MIDI controller, just so I can kind of like filter it in and out as I'm working and like play around and experiment a little bit here and there. And then we got this stuff here, which is all kind of like percussive samples, just random hits. Yeah, noises, all panned all over the place. Then we have some shakers, which is probably going to be, this is quite a good contact instrument for shakers. I don't tend to use it that much anymore because it does sound quite, it's a bit, I don't know, it sounds a bit too bright and a bit too MIDI and a bit too fake sounding sort of thing. Like if you can just get yourself some actual shakers and a decent mic, that's going to sound way better. And have like actual, you know, sort of organic rhythm with weird kind of mistakes in there and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of what you want with those sort of instruments. Loads of hats, and kind of percussive elements. Probably too many hats, but at the time I thought it sounded good, so went with it. Generally, like nowadays, what I do is I'll have all my drums going into one group where they get processed collectively as well, and then that then gets passed into my stereo bus, which also gets processed. And like down here, so I'll have my drums into one, all my low end stuff, basses and all that sort of stuff into another, MIDI and top end synths and things like that, and atmospheres into another one, and then kind of effects and things like that at the very end. It's not always as basic as that, but majority of the time, everything kind of gets grouped into those kind of like separate channels, processed again, and then those 4 or 5 will get sent into my stereo bus to get processed again. And that's kind of drums pretty much. Then we've got pads and bits and bobs. So this stuff here, I think, what I was kind of going for was like quite an epic sort of like almost like underworldy sort of late 90s, early 90s progressive trancey sort of vibe. So we've got like this choir, which is just the EXS choir, which it sounds a bit fake, but I quite like that. And then we've got a pad here in Zebra, which I use on quite a lot of stuff still, Zebra. That's the breakdown, and then that also this Diva bass, which is a Bodzin ripoff, basically. And on here, what have I got on here? A little bit of sidechaining, even though, I mean, it's the breakdowns, there's no kick. But I do tend to kind of like sidechain my bass on, even on breakdowns, just because not as, you know, we're not going like full on super sidechain sort of thing, but it's just a subtle kind of like dip in the volume, just because I think we're so tuned to that sound now. That is like the normal bass sound, is to have that, you know. So I tend to do that even on breakdowns, but just like a little bit, you know. A little bit of EQ, Ambassador, which is quite cool, just to add a bit more low end. Like that's without, I guess it's going to be like all of this. This kind of gets boosted a little bit when that comes back in again. What's going on? There we go. Yeah, so this is kind of like adding some of those sub-harmonics back in there again. Because again, there's no kick drum, so there's nothing competing with that sort of space down on the low end. And then a bit of EQ. That gets processed by in this kind of low end here. Nowadays, what I tend to have on my low end, my kind of like low bus, will be like a Pultec or something like that, just to kind of create a bit more sort of warmth around the bass. But I wasn't doing that then. I don't know. Maybe I didn't own the Pultec at that point. I don't know. And then what else have we got? The rest of the bass, which is here. So this is kind of like the main bass. Oh, that's weird. That should be there as well. Did I delete that? All right. Well, it's not there. Never mind. Yeah, then the main bass, we've got Zebra. Just doing like, I think that's just doing a top end, which is something I still do now, really. I kind of like, I tend to use the Moog for all the kind of like really subby bass. So this is kind of like doing everything that's kind of like, that can't be replicated on any kind of soft synth, I think. That kind of like real sort of depth you get with the low end on the actual Moog. So all my kind of low end is done by the Moog, and then the top end, because it's just easier and quicker and I can kind of find sounds that I want a lot faster, I'll use things like Zebra or Diva to kind of create the sort of harshness and the brightness at the top end of the bass line. So those two together sound like that. And again, a little bit of processing, Ambassador again on the Moog to add even more depth, compressors and EQs. Same again with the Zebra bass. Then we've got all the Arps, and there's a lot of them. So this here, if I do this from here, oh, that's bright. What I wanted to do was just create kind of like almost like a wall of sound with synths, and then have everything sort of filter in and out of each other. So there's just, what is that? That's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different synths all doing the same thing. So we've got the Moog first, doing like quite a nice little plinky thing. We've got another Moog that comes in at the end here. What's this one? Oh yeah, like a really reverby Moog. Quite nice that is. And then we've got Zebra again, which is the main one, which is really bright. Lots of delay, lots of reverb. Jupiter, which I don't use at all anymore because it completely kills my computer. And then, what's this one down here? Diva, probably. Yeah, like a nice little mid-lowy plonky thing. And all together, they kind of like evolve around each other. So there's always like a kind of like top-end brightness Arp, a MIDI one, and kind of like a sort of mid to low one as well. And they all just kind of like sort of come in and out of each other, basically. And it keeps that whole section sounding melodically interesting, because it's just the same Arp over and over again, but it kind of keeps it all sort of evolving sort of naturally. And again, that all gets processed, that all gets sent to my synth bus, which has, I guess, EQ just for visuals, Millennia, which is kind of adding a bit of width. It's kind of like setting, I think it's mid-side processing. So yeah, so it's just boosting the top end of the sides to create a bit more sort of width. It's creating quite a lot of harshness, to be honest. I wouldn't probably go that far with it, but it creates a bit of width on like all of those synths together. And then we have all this stuff here, which is sort of weird, plinky sort of atmospheres and things like that, and just stuff that's panned left and right and all over the place and moves in, you know, there's this kind of like panning tremolo effect on all of it sort of thing, so it just kind of moves all around the place. Weird delays, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's that. And then just kind of like white noise down at the bottom, crashes and all that sort of stuff, and weird rhythms, and, you know, just to add atmosphere to the final arrangement. Oh, actually, yeah, let's talk about thingy. So, in terms of processing, generally, like I said before, everything goes kind of into those separate buses. The drums get processed separate. Well, drums get processed individually, bit of EQ and hit stuff here and there, and then all get sent into a drum bus. Usually, I don't know why I didn't, but on all my tracks now, everything goes into that kind of same bus. I've got like 3 saturators on this as well, I just realized. So I've got this, the UAD, this bit of compression, just to kind of tighten it up a little bit, and then a passive EQ, which I don't really use anymore either. Just kind of knocking out some of the kind of like mud. That's then getting sent to this saturator. But then also, I just realized the final output. Yeah, so this is also getting sent to its own saturator as well. Saturn, what's that doing? So like a little bit of parallel saturation on the final output as well. So there's quite a lot of saturation on this track. The low end, like I said, usually nowadays I'll have a Pultec on here that's just kind of like boosting the warmth around that bass line, and then kind of like ducking a little bit of the mud that will happen just after it. The synth, I'll probably still use this, but maybe a little bit of compression on there as well, especially when I've got 6 different Arps. I don't know why. I was just like, yeah, just stick an EQ on it, it's fine. And then effects is usually just kind of like top and tailing, just knocking out anything that's just too bright, and then knocking out all of the kind of low end sort of thing. And then on the stereo bus, I've got press work, which I don't really use anymore. But that's just compressing a very, very sort of minute amount, just kind of catching anything kind of strays. Press work's good, but it sounded a bit too, it felt like it was adding a bit too much colour over across the whole track sort of thing. And that was usually something that I'd like to leave up to mastering engineers really. But yeah, on that kind of stereo bus, you kind of want something that's a bit more transparent sounding, I guess. And then on this track, I've got AMEC EQ, which again is just adding a bit more sort of top end processing to those sort of side frequencies. Really subtle, but just kind of makes everything sound a bit more kind of like brighter and open and just cleaner, I guess. And then, yeah, I mean, that's that. This, I will tend to use this on everything now, the Metric AB. So I have like a load of presets where I'll have a bunch of tracks in here that I quite like sonically sort of thing. And then I can A/B between their track and my track. I won't play this now just in case it comes up with copyright issues on YouTube or whatever. But generally, this is the best way to kind of like sort of process what's going on in your track. You can kind of understand what's going on sort of visually, see what's going on with your stereo image, see what's going on, especially with your low end. And then you can sit there and compare and contrast that to other people's songs, tracks that you like. If you've got a track that you love the sound of, you particularly like the mix on or something like that, bring it into here, make sure the levels are kind of accurate, and then you just go to work on making your track sound as sort of close to their sonics as possible. That's probably the most important tool that I've ever used and still use and will always use. And there's different ways of doing it, but like some people will have the track, they'll bring the track into their Logic project or Ableton project or whatever. I quite like using that thing because you can switch between sort of different functions quite easily. And that's Spaces, basically. I feel like I didn't really cover anything, but I've been talking for half an hour according to my computer, so that's Spaces. Cool. That is Spaces. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you found something sort of semi-useful in there, and if not, then I'm sorry for wasting your time. Let me know what you want to see next, and I will record it. And also give me a shout if you've got any questions or anything like that at all. Put them in a thing, and I'll get back to you on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. Enjoy the rest of your day. Love you all.